We lost Vanessa. Are we a go?
It says we're streaming live on YouTube.
Okay. I just know Vanessa disappeared and you became the host, Mark.
We're recording.
So,
I'm gonna
all
check.
right.
I'll check YouTube.
Will you do that? Thanks, Chelsea, just before we start, just to make sure.
See, this is what we get for everybody getting here early.
That's right. I'll see that never happens again.
I'm blaming you, Stivers.
Yes, that's right. I know how to fix that.
Vanessa's back.
Oh, thank God Vanessa's back before we have to start moving people in and out of the room.
We're live on
Yeah.
YouTube.
Okay, that's fine. Great.
Little glitch.
Good evening,
there.
everyone. Oh, sorry, Vanessa. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen, January 18th, 2021 virtual meeting. All selectmen are in attendance. Call the meeting to order at 6:31. First item of business is public comment. If we have anybody in the attendees that would like to offer a comment, please raise your hand. Mr. Mello, I think he's coming over for the noise bylaw discussion, but he certainly can make a comment prior to the discussion, if we could bring him over. Good evening, Mr. Mello. Were you looking to make a comment under public comment?
The only comment I have is, Sam, Lisa, thank you for at the beginning of the meeting saying that the bylaw is on the warrant, because Peter and I had an agreement that he would be the good cop and I would be the bad cop, and you guys took that away from me.
No, that's great. Thank you. It is. I think it's listed as Article 32 at this point. There's a placeholder there. Depending on how far you guys get and if you're ready for town meeting, you'll certainly be available to, to present. So
Peter's driving us. We're finishing.
there you go. Peter's a great guy. Vanessa, can we bring Chief Hollis over as well? I think he has been involved as ex officio. And Peter, I see you don't have a quorum yet at this point. We'll keep watch in case you do.
We weren't planning on having one. I just did that out of courtesy, just in case.
Perfect. Nope, that's great. So again, welcome. We've appreciated all the work you've done. It was quite the survey. There was quite a few interesting responses within there.
Yeah.
So thank you for spearheading this. Mr. Mello as well. Thank you for being on the committee. And I'll leave it to you. I don't know if your plan is, if you had a presentation or you just wanted to talk a little bit about the survey, where you're at.
Well, I just, part of the charge was to report back to the selectmen occasionally, and I just wanted to give you a brief casual update. And we do have one question for you folks. But we've been meeting once a week, sometimes for several hours. We've looked at all kinds of current bylaws, bordering towns throughout the whole state. We've reached out and we've had one public forum where we were looking for input, and I'm proud to say that we really weren't surprised by anything. There were no curveballs. Everything that was mentioned in the forums we'd already pretty much kind of talked about. We did review the prior attempts to make a noise bylaw, and we kind of came to pretty much an agreement that there was a little complicated and a little restrictive. So kind of give us, we have the benefit of having that attempt to base what we want to do. We came up with the idea of having a survey, and we broke out in a work group, and the survey was, I was very happy with the survey. But I think we got a pretty good response with the survey. Some interesting, I did forward the results to you folks. Hopefully you had a chance to review them. Some of them were quite interesting. I won't really get into the nitty gritty of those. They kind of speak for themselves. But part of the charge was it was supposed to hold 3 public forums. Considering we're on a pretty tight time schedule, we were hoping that the survey would count as a forum. I don't know if that's something that you folks have to vote on, but pretty much what we were looking for input, we got from the survey on would be that middle forum. We will have another forum once we come up with a draft, so to speak, where we'll get input on what people think of what we come up with. But we were hoping that you would forgive us for that one forum. So that's something that hopefully you can address. Pretty much we did have a question on the time frame. And then Sam's been attending the meetings pretty regularly, and I understand that maybe you moved the town meetings, kind of unsure when that's going to happen, but we would like to be advised when you expect us to have something at your meeting. Would be kind of nice. So that's pretty much it, and I'm available for any questions that you might have.
Great,
That's it.
Thank you. So I think the time frame for town meeting is, even though town meeting is actually delayed, I think Mr. Purple's going with the assumption that we still want everything done and in as if we were still doing a March, I think it's 26th, town meeting. Is that correct, Mark? That's the assumptions you're making at this point?
Well, the board tells me something different. We're still moving everybody towards March 26th.
Okay, so the time frame would be, so you still want to hold potentially one more forum. And I would think in order to have council to review it, Mark, it would be the end of February. Does that sound?
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Okay. I mean, you can use that as your shoot for date. I
Okay.
think there's a little bit of play potentially in there as well, but that gives council the opportunity to review it as well. As far as the third,
there is a fair amount of discussion in a lot of the topics. So it's not something that's very easily done quickly. So we would appreciate as much time as possible. So, I mean, if it's guaranteed that you're going to be at least a month out, we certainly could use that month, because, I mean, we're meeting, weekly for hours, and, there has been some concern about how much time that's being put into this by some of the members. So we really would appreciate if it's definitely going to be a month, then we would love to have that extra month.
okay.
So.
As far as forum, I'm not opposed if you think that you're reaching the level. Can I just ask, how many attendees did you have at your first public forum?
About 12.
12? Okay. So the survey was a huge success then with the numbers that you were able to generate from that.
Right.
Okay, I'll open it up to the board for questions and comments. Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you. Mr. Goodney, thank you for coming, and Mr. Mello and Chief Paulus. And thank you to your committee's work on this. I know that you've been meeting for some pretty lengthy meetings, so I definitely appreciate all of your input. I was impressed with the survey results. I thought that you had a good amount of people give a wide variety of feedback. So I think you have a lot to work with there. I think I was the one that suggested 3 public forums initially. I think it was more to, gain as much public outreach as possible. But I think given the amount of survey results that you have, and it seems like most people completed the survey, I would be open to just limiting it down to 2. Although if you have another public forum prior to you writing your bylaw, I think it may be beneficial, although maybe not required, to have some sort of information session or record what the specifics of the bylaw are prior to town meeting, so that way folks can educate themselves before. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a public forum, but I think some sort of, so people understand what they're voting on prior to going to town meeting would be helpful.
Mr. Haley.
Yeah, hey, gents, all of you, very nice work. I watch very little in real time, just because it's like watching a TV show. I like to jump ahead, but I've watched a ton of what you folks have been working on and have been very impressed. I agree with Chelsea in terms of the forums. I don't think we have to. I mean, would I feel comfortable saying that the survey is a good substitute for a forum? Absolutely. But I think what it sounds like you might be interested in doing is having one more, whatever we want to call it, forum, but opportunity for folks to give feedback to the discussions you've had, maybe some initial thoughts that you have down on paper, and then come up with a finished or close to finished product that can be run through this board, quite frankly, and also the town council. I don't think we put in the charge the timing. What I would suggest is you are likely to want to, and I think it'd be very productive to have again, whatever we want to call it, but let's call it a forum for now, after the fact. In other words, after you have essentially completed your work, and then you have an opportunity not so much to get input coming in your direction, but input going the other direction to explain before town meeting why you came to the decisions that you did, what you're trying to accomplish, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, and that would have the virtue as well of clicking off the third box for a public hearing forum, whatever we want to call it. And the only other comment, I mean, from you guys know more about noise bylaws than you probably ever thought you would or ever wanted to, and kudos for that. I guess my one observation is that, and it is from the survey, it's like a lot of things. There are a percentage of people who are strongly opposed to anything resembling a noise bylaw. And there are probably pretty close to a percentage of people who think that it should be a stringent vehicle, either because of their neighborhood or whatever the reason. And it sounds like what you folks are gravitating towards is obviously taking those two extreme views into consideration, but looking at the vast middle class. And for two reasons. Number one, it's got to be something that passes, number one. But number two, it has credibility with not folks on, if you will, one side of the issue or on the other side of the issue, but has credibility for 10,000 people in town who are going to have to live with this thing if it passes. So that would be my one observation, other than the first one, which is I think you guys are doing a terrific job. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Mr. Stivers.
Thanks. I echo Marty's comments. Kudos to the group. I think we put you in a bit of a tight spot in terms of the delay of getting the committee appointed. So the timeline was very tight when you got off the ground there. So doing a great job, working hard and meeting frequently to move through all this stuff. And so I think that's a critical success factor here that you folks have done a great job at. Chelsea made a great suggestion, I think, of coming up with some sort of an explanation before town meeting that might be, again, some sort of a video created not necessarily out of the public forum, but just a standalone video that describes, here is the proposal for the bylaw, here are some important points that people need to understand as they think about how they're going to vote at town meeting. So there's a recorded version sitting out there somewhere on the website that people can refer to, and people can be more educated about what the issues are and have better information to make up their minds. So I think all that's, again, good progress, and it sounds like we're headed toward the finish line here, which is, again, great news. I would comment, I've attended a number of these meetings. I found a number of them disturbingly loud. So we certainly need a noise bylaw. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Mr. Dennington.
Hi, thank you for your work on the noise bylaw committee. I also am fine with the idea of, in lieu of having using the survey as a what was the term we were using? Forum. But I also do like Chelsea's suggestion of having an informational session. I think that's all the comments I have for you right now. But I thought the survey was very interesting, and Marty's characterization of it is very good.
Thank you, Andrew. So I also am watch, as Marty said, I like to tend to watch them on YouTube and, be in my jammies and, have a cup of cocoa as I do it need be. I think you have covered all bases through the meetings that you've had. All perspectives are covered, which I think is a huge challenge typically But I think the committee that was sat does that. It covers all extremes and then the middle point, as well as Marty said. I also agree that I think, Chelsea, that was a great idea to be able to do a forum to educate. My question on that is, I mean, could we do a joint forum potentially with the Board of Selectmen and the committee and allow the committee to present to us? You know, it's a recorded meeting. And I think any questions that may come up as well, it gives them the opportunity to answer before town meeting. You know, so you'll get a whole nother perspective. So that's just something to consider as well. But I thank you for the hard work you've done. Chief Paulus, do you want to, I know Mr. Purple wanted to add something, but Chief, I'll come to you next and see if you want to add anything to this discussion as well. Mr. Purple.
Madam Chair, thank you. I know that Mr. Goodney was going to get to it, so I'll just jump in. I do want to acknowledge, I mean, the survey was great, and I love the fact that, you know, people are very willing not to just check the box. They want to tell you why they're checking the box. But I know that Katie Berry in our office did an awful lot of work with Mr. Fling trying to get this survey right and get it all up in that. So I just want to acknowledge the work that she did, you know, behind the scenes to try to help the committee to get this right, because I know that she put in a lot of time with that.
Thank you. Chief Paulus, welcome.
Good to be here. Just very quickly, started out, I thought it was moving a little slow, and I was admittedly a little frustrated with the process. But as it's gone along, I see that it had to take place this way. After seeing the survey, and I'll echo everybody's sentiments, the board's done a marvelous job of seeing all points of view and, you know, directing the ship to where it needs to be. So I'm enthused, especially after the last few meetings.
Great, thank you. Mr. Miller, do you want to add anything?
No, I think, well, I guess yes. There's all been really good constructive feedback. Chelsea, your recommendation for informational session afterwards, I think is a great idea. How information needs to be presented in a very unique, powerful way, which our committee does not have the power or resources to do that. So if we're going to really have a informational session with videos and so forth, we will have to leverage the town's resources to figure out how to morph it in a more powerful way. And as Peter mentioned early on, in our committee, part of our challenge is not just creating a bylaw, is by the survey is clear. We need to sell the survey or sell the bylaw to our citizens who don't realize we need it. And I'm one of the ones that a year ago, like, why do we need a bylaw? I'm fine where I'm living. But just listening to the stories and of our local citizens, I think we do need one.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
I think it is, you know, a fair part of the process that once we do come up with what we come up with and we bring it forward to you, then there will be a period between that point, if you accept it in its whole entirety, there will be an education component where we could sell it to the rest of the town before the meeting. I don't know how that's going to happen, but you know, that's something that the committee is going to have to brainstorm on how we're going to do that. But I you know, obviously we put in a lot of effort and a lot of time. We want it to pass, and I think a little bit more effort. Whether it's, I can't really speak how that would happen, but certainly there should be some sort of effort to, you know, sell it and educate. Okay. Whatever we come up with.
Okay, Marty, I think Chelsea was first, and then I'll come to you second. Go ahead, Chelsea.
So I guess along those lines, I was thinking that we could create a video like some other boards and committees have done in the past and post on the town website. I believe that Chief Achilles did that last year as it related to the tender to educate residents on why that was needed, or maybe it was Capital that did it. Somebody did it, but have that available on the town website, and you know, use social media to circulate that video, and we could do a joint meeting with your committee to discuss, you know, the ins and outs of the bylaw, and that would also be available for people to view. So I guess I wasn't thinking of anything elaborate. I'm probably not an expert in those kinds of avenues, but I was just thinking, put it on the town website, have it on the clerk's page where he has all the town meeting information so people can view it ahead of time. That's kind of where I was coming from.
Okay, thank you, Chelsea. Mr. Haley.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar that I guess there are two options that pop into my mind. Number one is to do a separate video that is identified and could have the chair speaking, or the chair and one or two other people presenting and walking through the specifics. It sounds like you're leaning towards a relatively digestible product. And by that, it doesn't sound like it's going to be 12 pages long. It's going to be more like 2 or 3 or maybe 4 pages long. And as a result, I think that lends itself to an easy visual in terms of just walking through. So I don't think it has to be terribly elaborate. The other thing is you could do that at the beginning of a meeting. Do that same thing and just make it clear through the town's website, social media, otherwise, that if you want to see the presentation about the ins and outs of the proposed bylaw, it's available on the noise bylaws subcommittee meeting of March 15th, whatever the date is. And I think either one of those, again, I don't think it has to be terribly elaborate. And I always say that because I'm not like Chelsea, I'm not terribly good at producing anything that's terribly elaborate. So I think the spoken word combined with the words that you're going to put on paper for the bylaw will carry you a long way.
Great. Thank you. Chief, I have one question for you. And again, I don't know where you think you may or may not end up with this. I guess you'll know closer to town meeting. If I would assume that you would be considering potentially adjusting your budget in some way, because if some type of sound meter or something along those lines is going to be required by this bylaw, we're going to have to, if approved, we're going to have to supply them. And again, I don't know where you guys may or may not end up, but just, I don't know if you've kept that in the back of your mind that there may be some cost involved potentially.
Yeah, we'll see where it ends up. Even if we do, I don't think it'll be a huge cost proposition. I think there'd be plenty of money left in something like Harvard that we could dip into and get the meters. I don't think we're looking at something too terribly expensive. Just a comment a little further on getting something informational out. I don't know what the restrictions will be. I know that they were really just getting started using the studio over at SAM to do some interviews and presentations, very professionally done. Maybe have a panel of the noise committee and have a moderator ask questions and then produce that as a video to pull out. So just a thought, maybe even working towards getting back to some normalcy. So just an idea.
No, that's a great suggestion, Chief. Thank you. All right, Mr. Mello, I see your hand is up.
Sorry, when I meant needing help from the town, for social media, if you professionally create a video, it's actually negatively correlated to adoption of that information. So what you actually want is really raw videos of even testimonies of citizens who had issues with the noise and how this would help them. A handful of those. Chief Paul is saying that this will help empower the police to support us. So my comment wasn't about the professionalism of the actual video production. It was more about the means of thinking about how to actually create the message, which our committee has a variety of experiences, but not that in that I know of. So
okay, thank you. 1 second, Andrew. Mr. Goodney first.
Yeah, I just had a procedural question. If we come before you with a document and it is accepted, are you going to be looking for us to present that at town meeting, or is that something that you folks are going to do? Because if we are, then, I want to keep that in mind and we'll work on how we would do that.
That's an interesting question. In the past, on some articles, it's been a member of the board. But I don't know that I would necessarily be against having the committee, me personally, having the committee present it. You've done all the work. and the opportunity to present and answer questions of the public as to how you got there would have to come from your committee. I don't know what other members' thoughts are, Marty. And Andrew, I'll come back to you, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes, unless, and sometimes there is a reluctance to do it, but I think Lisa's absolutely right. You all have done the work, and presumably, again, having seen you all work in, the progress of your work, I would be very surprised if our board doesn't adopt it in whole or in substantial part. And so the answers to how you got from point A, the formation of the committee, to point wherever we are, the creation of this bylaw, you're going to be much better able to answer those process questions and even those substantive questions than we are. So unless there's a reluctance, and that's fine if there is, and I could understand that, but unless there's a reluctance, my preference actually would be for you all to be the presenters.
Agreed. Mr. Stivers, and then Andrew, I'll come right to you.
Works for me.
Okay. Andrew, you get twofold. You can answer this question, and then you can comment as you wanted to, and then we'll go to Chelsea.
Okay, so I was just keeping track of the comment that I had, so I'm not sure I remember what the question was, but my comment was just when we're talking about this video, I think there's a fine line right between a video which is informational and one which is an advocacy, and I think that this should be an informational video, if you understand the distinction that I'm drawing here. I think basically you're going to make the case for why your proposal should be adopted by making an impressive presentation in terms of how much information you've considered, but I do think that it shouldn't formally ask for a yes vote on the proposal. Do you understand?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
My question, the last question I had was, do you want us to present a town meeting, or do you?
Yes, you should.
Want to do it? So.
Yeah, no, I think that you're going to be the experts on this.
Yeah, so I just want to get the committee together and figure out who's going to do it. We got to, that's a process that has to be vetted out, so.
Okay, Andrew, are you done? I'll go to Chelsea.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that makes sense. Yeah,
I mean, and anything we can do to help you, obviously, but this is your document, and you guys have put all the work in, and it's really time for you to educate and to shine as well, to put some real spotlight on the good work that you guys have done in a really short period of time, based on town meeting, the town meetings will. So anything we can do, just let us know, let Mr. Purple know, and we'd be happy to help in any way that we can.
Okay, thank you. I can share that with you that it is quite a burden being the scribe. The committees chose to share that burden, so every week we pick a scribe, but I don't know how you can alleviate that in the future, but I mean, I'm sure these people with the minutes that they're producing it's taking hours and hours and hours. I know I have been on committees before. We had a town employee that was assigned to the committees that would do that business for us, but I realize that, there's a lot of work to be done, but that would be my only, maybe reach out for help would be if somebody wants to volunteer to be the scribe. But otherwise, which seems kind of strange because, it is all recorded video wise. So there is.
Did you say Mr. Stivers was there every time?
That's right.
Oh, Marty, Marty, that's brilliant.
Full notes. Hey, Lisa,
Yes, Sam, go ahead.
Quick comment. Follow up to Andrew's point. I actually have a different view from Andrew. I think it is the job of the committee to actually not, blatantly go out and twist people's arms. But if the committee does this and comes up with a product that they believe in and think should be supported by town meeting, then I think that's a point that they ought to reinforce and, obviously not over the top, but factually say we've looked at all the options. We think this is something that's on balance a good thing for the town, and we hope the town meeting will support it. So I realize there may be different views on that, but that's the way I feel about that one. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Sam. All right, gentlemen, thank you for spending part of your evening with us. Again, enjoyed the survey. I enjoyed the comments. A lot of helicopter comments, which kind of shocked me, but Go ahead,
Can I
Peter.
just get one clarification? So do we
Yes.
have to do the 3 meetings, or can we go with the 3 forums, or can we go with the 2?
With the 2 in your final forum will be, unless I'm misunderstanding, your final forum basically is going to be when you present it. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Good enough.
Okay. Awesome.
folks.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
folks.
you.
Have a good night.
Nice.
So we're
Thank
gonna
you.
keep Chief Paulus here with us to start out with. For his 23 budget discussions, and we're gonna do police and fire. But we'll start with the police while the chief is here. I see Chief Achilles isn't here yet anyway. So Chief, welcome. Thank you. Thank you for all of your diligence as we've gone through this process. I'll start with if there's any additional information you want to share with the board. And we appreciate you coming for a very detailed budget discussion.
Sure. First of all, I just like to thank our business administrator, Cindy McLeod. She does a fantastic job. If the old adage, ask her what time it is, she'll tell you how to build a watch. So she's great with all the help and the figures, and it's constantly changing. I will say, looking at the budget, it's pretty much a mirror of what's been the last few years. If you look at it, everything in the top half that says contractual, that's under the current union contract. There are a few items in there. If you look at the budget where we just took 3-year averages to come up with our proposed budget number, there's a few other items in there that are just increases in software or contracts, maintenance contracts for some of the items that we have. The only change, as you know, we've actually had a lot of discussion on it since November, is the addition of a 5th dispatcher. I think we all have enough information on that at this point. We did make some adjustments in the budget to try and absorb that a little more. That would be cutting full-time officers, dispatch officers overtime, and then also a cut in the part-time salaries to absorb it. As you know, we have open shifts created by the current schedule. Probably should have been budgeted with 5 for quite some time now, but we've been able to run with 4. Market conditions, we're having some trouble with that. So that's the only change. Hopefully I've given the board enough information, and Chief Achilles can certainly echo our concerns when he comes on. So that's what we're asking you to consider. So right now it would be a 3% increase in our budget as it stands today.
And that 3% is before the current contract negotiations, correct?
Correct. We're currently going to start talking in a few weeks, and hopefully we get something done fairly quickly. But the current 3-year contract expires June 30th of this year. And that's for both police and dispatch.
Okay. So we'll open it up for questions and comments. We'll start with Marty this time.
Yeah, I was going to say, I told the chief that I'd at least try to start off, since he and I spent an hour plus or so yesterday sitting down and walking through. Just to put some additional maybe flesh on the bones of this, the total dollar amount increase currently in the budget is almost exactly $75,000. So every $25,000 is a 1%. So it's a $75,000 increase from last year's approved budget, and 67,000 of that comes on the personnel category. And we spent a lot of time talking about the dispatcher, and the chief's right, because you start off and a new dispatcher is at about $47,000, which is really about 2/3 of the total personnel increase. But that's offset in 2 different ways for a total of almost $23,000. So the total additional cost for the dispatcher is really less than 1% of the budget. It's about $24,000. the additional personnel costs that get you up to the $67,000 figure for the entirety of the personnel difference between last year and this year. It is, and we're going to face this for a number of departments. It's all contractual, and other than really reducing services, reducing the number of personnel, there's not a whole lot of flexibility for the town in those numbers. And that's so when you add in the dispatcher and the chief knows this, I didn't think it was appropriate, and we obviously didn't do it within fiscal year 22 to add in the additional position and put the chief in a I'd say a difficult management position, but they're all difficult management positions. So we put him in a management position to deal with that during fiscal year 22. And then we would consider the proposed additional position in the context of the entire FY23 budget. That being said, obviously we've got the entire budget to consider, but both before and now looking at fiscal year 23, my personal view is the chief has made a reasonable case for the addition of that dispatcher, especially when you factor in the way that the department would offset the cost. So to have a full inventory of dispatchers for an additional $24,000 strikes me as a reasonable cost for additional cost for the town to incur. And then below the line, you're talking about $8,000 in additional costs, which gets you up to the total of $75,000. And those mainly come from maintenance costs and the like. I mean, I certainly think we could chip away at those. I'm not quite sure if a lot of that would be penny wise and pound foolish. I think we've learned in the past that chipping away at maintenance costs is at least risky, maybe even always problematic. So that's where that's what the chief and I spent an hour walking through and chiseling down a lot of these numbers. But that's correct me if I'm wrong, chief, but I think that's the breakdown of where these numbers put us. I think unfortunately that it's a refrain we're going to see for a lot of departments, that the only way really to drive numbers down is to think about a reduction in services. And I'm not sure if that's something the town is interested in doing. So that's my capsule summary of my discussions with the chief and my moderate dive into the numbers.
Great. Thanks, Marty. Sam?
As usual, I agree with Mr. Healy. Very eloquently put. I followed.
Sam, I noticed you didn't say that when I volunteered you to take the minutes for the committee.
I have a little bit of self-determination here, but I have followed the conversations here and at advisory about the budget. I think I understand what the proposals are. I've consistently been a supporter of the additional dispatch position. I think that's important for public safety. I'm actually not eager to go in and try to dig into the below the line costs. I think there's going to be a real challenge for all departments in terms of sort of operating costs for FY23, given the inflation pressures we're seeing, which are substantial. So we can budget now, but I got to believe the cost of materials, equipment, and so forth is going to go up substantially over the next 15, 18 months, something like that. So I think that everybody is going to need a little bit of cushion there, and probably be a real management challenge to hold it within the budgets that are proposed here in terms of the operating cost piece. So again, I'm fine. I don't have any other questions at this point, and I think the chief and his team have done a good job of putting this budget together, and I support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Andrew?
Hi. Thanks, Chief. I also had I spoke with Chief Paulus earlier today, and I had done kind of a similar exercise that Marty had. It's not really a budget where you can pull out one or two large items and think about whether we really need to spend it. And on the operational expenses, the ones that have the highest year-over-year increase are their 3-year averages. So we don't know whether they're going to come in over or under, but I think the way that you budget it there is reasonable. And I also appreciate your bringing to our attention, because I know I didn't remember it, that actually in your memo to advisory in December 2020, I now see the line that the department will be looking to add at least one full-time position to the telecommunications staff in the 2023 budget year. So, it's something we've known it's in the pipeline, and yeah, I think that the budget is reasonable.
Thank you. Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you. Hi, Chief. I think you make a compelling case for the 5th dispatcher. I am supportive of bringing it to town meeting, which was one of my concerns earlier this year, or the end of last year. I do have a few questions, though. The tasers are still up in the air, right, in terms of a warrant article versus in the operating budget?
Yeah, I actually had a long discussion with Marty yesterday. A little complicated to dive into, but that's a capital item where I did a package with body cameras, tasers, which we need upgraded in the short term, and replacement of the cruiser cameras, which would all work in one package. Advisory right now, the feeling I got in my meeting with them is it's quite an expensive proposition. It's $662,000 over 10 years. So that's about $62,000 a year. Their inclination was to wait on the body camera part of it because it's an emerging field and they think that there'll be grant money available. I actually have some information from the board. The Mass Chiefs formed a committee, and they're actually working with the legislature right now to come up with maybe a statewide body camera policy. I don't know if funding is going to be included in that or they'll make it a mandatory state law. But if we hold off on that part of it and we just do the tasers, I do have a proposal I'm working with Mark where we could actually take out the $10,600 owed come July 1st and take that off the budget, pay for it with possibly Harvard or forfeiture money. And then we'd have to revisit the total package, probably through a capital lease item in the 24 budget. So that is one item.
Okay.
If we decide to just go with the tasers, that I could remove the $10,600 this coming July 1st.
Okay. Thank you. And if you get the 5th dispatcher, would you fill, let's say you had the 2-person shift and somebody was out, would you backfill that second person on shift, or would you leave that open?
Well, we do have grant money, and that's what the grant money, it's used on a lot of personnel costs and whatnot. So we would backfill it if we had the grant money available. If not, then it just goes with one person. However, I think I've stated in the past, we're burning through that grant money, constantly training new part-timers who, either move on to different jobs or their schedule doesn't permit it. So that's where a lot of that grant money is going. I'd love to use it someday to supplement dispatch, especially during the busy times with 2-person, dispatch. I know Chief Achilles would be ecstatic, to hear that. But that's what the plan would be. But no, if the budget didn't allow it, it would stay, one person.
Okay. So I guess I'm a little bit of a different mindset than the others on the board. I am supportive of the 5th dispatcher, but I would like to see it offset a little bit more in the budget. And I don't know how you budgeted for the 5th dispatcher would take into account backfilling time off or whatever, if there's some wiggle room there. The other thing is if you could compare your year-to-date FY22 to actual and see if the 3-year average items are falling in line with what you expect to spend through the end of the year. And I know we probably just have 6 months worth of data, but I'm happy to look at that with you as well. And the final thing that I'll say is, I think that we still have, regional dispatch on the table. And I think this is a reasonable request for a stopgap for now, given kind of the situation that we're in and the part-time struggles that we've had over, the last, 12 months or so. And also, there will be benefits added to, or there are benefits, I think, in the proposed budget for this position. So I know it's 20-something thousand, but then plus the benefits. I just want to make that comment. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chelsea. So a lot of my comments are similar to what have been said. I also think a compelling case, Chief, has been made for the fifth dispatcher. My expectation is I continue to go through the budget process with everyone and not just police or fire or DPW, the larger budgets. My expectation is to go through and see if there's any wiggle room anywhere where ultimately, we can give a little bit of relief to the taxpayers. And looking at your budget, I know the majority of it is contractual. I completely agree with Marty on that. A lot of it is contractual, but I'm still just, again, going through the exercise of still looking of where we can still potentially make things just a little bit lower, to get there. And maybe Chelsea's point to looking at the 3-year average and, where we're at 6 months in and where you project to be, maybe that's where the difference will come from. But I am supportive of moving forward as well with the fifth dispatcher. Marty, go ahead.
Yeah, the one thing, the chief's right. It was a pretty lengthy discussion about the tasers and the cameras. I mean, one quick sidebar. It is, the state's been talking about police reform. I think Southborough finds itself in a very good position from a public safety standpoint, and we haven't had the sort of issues that some other communities have. But I think there's a pretty strong consensus, certainly in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, that these body cameras, and Chief went through an explanation. It's not that sophisticated, but it takes a little while, about why they would be a significant upgrade, why they would be important. And again, from the consensus, I think that's pretty strong in Massachusetts, why it makes sense. Why in an environment where state revenues are mushrooming, despite the pandemic, the state tax revenues are up significantly, and every town, including Southborough, is getting squeezed because of what's happened in the breakdown between residential taxes and commercial taxes. I mean, the chief is absolutely right. This should be not only a state mandate, but a state-funded mandate. So I think that I didn't go into great depth with this in the chief yesterday, but thinking about it, I think that weighs in favor of possibly taking the 1-year approach, Chief, and seeing if, in fact, not doing the entire camera thing, but hoping that the state comes through with, again, both a mandate and funding for the cameras, and for us not to maybe have gone too soon and have expended on the capital side of things, a 10-year contract that maybe doesn't get grandfathered in, or it gets grandfathered out because we went too early. And the final thing I'll say about that, the reason that's somewhat important is because the other thing I talked with the chief about is obviously our nonprofits and discussions that have gone on in the last couple of years have been favorably disposed to funding on the capital side of things, number one, and on the public safety side of things, number two. So when we reach, and I think this will involve discussions with advisory, a consensus about what our capital items are going to be that we're going to support this year. That's something to keep in mind, that again, nonprofit contributions, which went up quite a bit last year, are likely to find a much better audience on the public safety side of things than in other areas. So.
Okay, thank you. Any final comments for the chief? I see none. Chief, thank you for giving us your time as always. We appreciate it, and we will let you go.
Well, thank you. I just want to thank the board. I know everybody, has put in a lot of their personal time to meet with me, take phone calls, explanations, especially really since November. So I appreciate that very much.
All right, Chief. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too. If we could bring in, is Chief Oh, Chief Achilles is there. Wonderful. And he's here. Good evening, Chief. How are you?
I'm good. I'm just waiting for my picture to come up.
Okay. So we appreciate you coming as well. I know we have a few different things besides budgets to kind of go over with you to update us on the strategic plan and discuss the accreditation as well. So again, welcome. Thank you for coming. Kind of the same thing as with Chief Paulus. We have the budget. I didn't know if there was anything specific you wanted to touch on. And we'll open it up to the board for any comments or, oh, there you are. Welcome.
Yeah, sorry about that. I
Nope.
guess I joined as a panelist now.
And, you know, so if there's anything you want to touch on briefly in your budget, and then we'll open it up to the board for any detailed comments, questions, or anything along those lines.
So would you like me to go over the strategic plan and accreditation first? Or do you want to do that after?
We can do that after. I think the accreditation piece may tie into the budget piece a little bit.
Okay.
So,
Perfect.
yeah, we can kind of lump them.
All right. Well, I think everybody's got the copy of the budget. And as Chief Paul said, I appreciate the fact that we've had a lot of discussions. It's gone through advisory, town administrator, feedback from a number of you. And if you look at the, salary and wages, that's about 88% of our budget, much like the other departments. And we did make an adjustment in there. We were carrying an anticipated increase in the overtime if contractual movement was made this year. So we took that out. So I think you'll see the bottom line now. It should be about 1.9% increase over last year's budget. The other items that were added into this year's budget more for an accounting purposes, we broke out an ambulance service fee. We broke out a little bit on the computer software and support. And then you'll see that we had the accreditation credentialing. And we also looked at other facility supplies and other training supplies. So again, the overall budget came in about 1.9% over last year. And I'll open it to any questions.
Thanks, Chief. Sam, I'm going to go to you first, but I just wanted to just update the board that I'm going to kind of tie the accreditation in at this piece to the budget. So I had met with the chief the other day and again this morning. I was struggling a little bit on the accreditation piece. I had went and kind of done an analysis of towns between 0 and 10,000, 10,001 to 20,000 and 50,000. I came up with 129 departments nationwide that were accredited under 50,000 residents. 59 of those were Department of Defense, so it left 70. So I had a discussion with the chief as far as the best use potentially of these funds and some concerns that I had as far as the public with being a tile breaker, I guess, potentially here in Massachusetts, because there are currently, I believe the chief said there are a couple that may be looking at this, but there's no one in Massachusetts or New Hampshire at this point that's accredited. There's one Hartford and then River Junction in Vermont. So again, I was just trying to get a sense of how I, as a member of the board, could justify this to the taxpayers that this was the time to do this. So in our discussions, one of the things the chief had mentioned was he might be able to use, take out the money for the accreditation and use that from Harvard funds. So it wouldn't hit the tax rate and he can still move forward with this plan. So that being said, I just wanted the board to be aware of that as we continue the discussions, the detailed discussions on the budget, that conversation took place. So Sam, I'll open it up to you.
Okay. Hey, Lisa, I think you're the liaison to the fire department, right? Still?
I am.
I mean, if there are any high points that you'd like to hit, sort of like Marty made some comments about the police budget where he's the liaison, is there anything that you would like to sort of provide us an overview before we dive in on an individual basis? I mean, if not, that's fine. I can go ahead, but.
Well, Sam, I think in the discussions I had met with Andrew Pfaff, and I from advisory had met with the chief, and we went over the discussions. We had some budgets. The budget had changed a little bit since we met with him on some things. I think there's a lot of things going on with the department, and I think that there's things the chief is looking to do to move the department forward, Sam. So I think in the chief's mind, the accreditation is one of those things. Maybe the chief's mind isn't the right verbiage to say, but it's important to the chief. I will say that. And it was finding a way, that we could move forward with this. And those were some of the highlights. I think that the budget itself was overall, reasonable. We had great discussions and lots of comments on it. So other than that, Sam, I think the accreditation piece was one of the highlights of the budget for the chief and wanting to move this forward. Chief, if I'm leaving anything out, feel free to jump in.
Okay, good, thanks. I was just interested, were there any, landmines or issues that were major concerns there that you had run across that others of us may not have found with less conversation about it? That's helpful, thank you. And as with the police budget, I've been following conversations at advisory and elsewhere about this, and so I think I've got a pretty good handle on what the expenditures are. And as we've already discussed with the police budget, most of this is salaries, largely contractual driven, don't have a lot of flexibility with that. And from what I've seen, the chief has done a good job of finding places to not waste money and be very effective in terms of spending proposals here. I actually have a pretty strong bias on the accreditation thing. I'm a big supporter of it. I think that while it may be true that there aren't many departments who have that, I think that's an important issue for internal morale, reinforcement of professionalism in the department. I think the chief's arrival has done a real boost to professionalism in the department to the advantage of the town. And I think that kind of thing continues to motivate the staff very positively. It gives them something to be proud of appropriately. And so I think there's real value from that, regardless of how many people do have it or don't have it. It's my understanding that the chief is already in the department have completed 2 of the 3 steps in that process at relatively low cost to the town. And I think it's like 15,000 or so and change to finish here. And that buys us 5 years worth of accreditation, as I understand it. The chief can correct me if I'm wrong. But $3,000 a year, I think, is a very reasonable price to pay for something that we can be proud of. And I think just reinforces morale and helps us hang on to good staff in the department at times that, again, I think it's important to have a long-term core of trained staff there to provide the services. So I'm a big supporter of it, and I realize that may not be everybody's view, but and it would be, if we can't pay for it out of the current operating budget, which I actually support doing, I think the town ought to pay for this. And I think the Harvard stuff could be used for other more one-time kind of things, but that's the way it has to be funded. I'd certainly support that just to get it done, because I think it's important. So I don't have any other questions, and I'll pass it along to whoever's next in line. Thanks.
Thanks, Sam. Mr. Dennington.
Hi, Chief. How are you?
Great. Thank you.
So I had some questions about the highlighted items in the budget, which look like were the new items. So just in terms of versions, I went back and so the printed version, which is in the packet, I can't see the percentage increase, but the spreadsheet, which I have, which was circulated, I think maybe like December, was 2.2. So I think maybe that you got from the 2.2 to the 1.9 by taking out the line item for accreditation credentialing, thinking that might be funded through a donation. Is that right?
No, actually, the money we reduced, there was a couple minor adjustments, but the bigger one was in our overtime. We took out approximately $6,500 that we anticipated we'd have to increase the overtime by if the firefighter's contract went through. We didn't carry any other raises, but we did carry that, but we just removed that. So I think that got us down to the 1.9.
Okay. And so the other larger items were computer software and support, ambulance billing service fee, and I guess those are the two biggest ones. And if you could just give some information about what those are.
Sure.
And with the ambulance billing service fee, is that something that's designed to increase revenue on the other side?
Yeah. So this is my third budget, maybe. My first one here, it wasn't mine. And just trying to be more accountable and track costs and allocate them correctly. We know that we don't really do a lot of computer repairs and maintenance. We do some, but we were carrying our software programs in that line, and working with finance and Carla, we identified that maybe a better, more appropriate way of tracking that would be calling it computer software and support. It's a line that's used other places. So there was a shift. We and some of these aren't even shifts because we understand increases in fees and services. So some of these will account for those. And then the ambulance billing service. This is something since I've been here, we pay for the ambulance billing company. They get a percentage of any collectibles we get. And that was really lined up into another line, contracted services. And there's been discussion of how,
I see that. Okay.
If we increase our revenues, that amount goes up. It comes out of our budget, which is at times counterproductive, that we're making more money and we get more money taking out of our operating budget. So I thought it was more appropriate to at least pull that one out by itself, so people could see you actually want it to go up. That means we're making more money. But unfortunately, if it goes up, that means we're burning through our set budget faster. So it was a way of accounting for it. And I think calling that out is important.
Okay. Yeah, I think that answers my questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. Ms. Malinowski.
Hi, Chief.
Good
Nice to
evening.
see you. So I actually don't have any further questions. I did get an opportunity to talk to the chief about what my questions were. I think in my discussions with him, we had some great back and forth regarding accreditation. I think that I'm coming from a different path than Sam. I think that the taxpayers have been extremely generous to the fire department over the last several years with the new station, new equipment, very supportive. And so I actually think that the department's morale is actually very good. I think a lot of that is attributed to Chief Achilles and the work that he's done to build cases that make pretty easy decisions in terms of vehicle acquisition, et cetera. So I do think that the chief's provided a lot of great leadership and structure around paths forward. I'm not going to say that I don't think that we should do accreditation. I do think that there's valuable parts to that accreditation, but I do not support it being in the budget. I think that the additional line item for overtime for training, I can get behind. I think that the chief is working on a lot of succession planning and professional development, which I'm very supportive of. But in terms of the accreditation piece, I think that if that's the path forward here for the department, I think we should be able to do it internally or with funding that's already available. So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Mr. Healy.
Yeah, hey, Chief, how are you?
Good evening. Thanks. I'm good.
So I agree with both Chelsea and Sam. I guess my issue is one of timing. The way, and I'm looking at the fire budget the same way I look at the police budget. And in that respect is what went up from last year, and if need be, looking back to some previous years, what went up into this proposed budget. And it's a particular red flag for me if that column, that increase column, it went up from zero. In other words, it's a new expense.
Mhm.
And the two on the, and I understand, same thing as with the police budget, and it's an issue, honestly, that we as a board are going to have to talk about, and I suspect it's going to be, part of a discussion at town meeting, because I don't think this board is going to support a budget that is in the 1 or 2% increase range. Maybe we're able to drive it down that far, but preliminary indications are that it will not. And so the question becomes, in order to get it down to a number like that, I think the town will have to understand, and the way we'll have to understand that what drives our budgets almost entirely are personnel costs. And if we're going to drive down our budget this year and for FY23, the driving down is not reducing increases, because we don't have dramatic increases. What we have is a dramatic shift in the allocation of the taxes. That's really is what is driving what our budget is going to look like at the end of the year. That's a long way of saying new stuff is really, really a hard sell for me. And I think the accreditation, I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great idea that we be a leader on the accreditation. I'm not there for FY23, and I don't think it should be in the budget. If it can be funded elsewhere, even understanding that money's fungible, then I'm supportive of that route, but I'm not supportive of it being in the budget. The other, I mean, your budget's only up $45,000 total, and a good chunk of that comes on the personnel side. The other one that sort of jumps out is the computer support, and you've explained that. Are we going to be able to track where that was offset from? Maybe that's not a question for you, but it sounds like that $10,000 number, which has got zeros going back through the previous years, that's money that was being spent, but it was being spent under another line item. Do I have that right?
Yeah, to clarify, if you looked at computer repairs and maintenance, we've been running around $7,000 to $9,000 a year. So it's line 52,540.
So is that, in other words, the 540 is that money from that is just going down into 545? Is that
Yes, pretty much, with an increase for the increase in software costs.
Okay. So it's not as it's a modest increase then.
Yeah.
The other one was that I noticed was out-of-state travel, which has got zeros leading up to this year. And from whence does that come?
So it's been zero because we basically have curtailed, and even prior to me, there was curtailed of going out of state for training and covering those costs. So if you travel to New Hampshire for a seminar and there it's overnight, right now that's borne by the employee, whether it be me or any other member. I think at some point we have to look at training opportunities that are not just solely in Massachusetts. I'm prepared, and I think we discussed this, if understanding the pressure on the current budget, I understand that maybe this is not the year to do that. I think it'd be very short-sighted if we don't ever think that we should curtail or make employees cover the whole expense of doing a professional educational seminar out of state. This past year I covered some of my own expenses for travel out of state. I can't expect firefighters and officers to do that. So that's where really that came from. But I think if we need to curtail that a little bit for this year, and as I mentioned, I think it's probably appropriate time that accreditation, I think, is going to be very, very important for this organization. It was a goal of mine when I got hired. We've been working on it. Now we're at a point where there's an expense for this year that if we want to commit, it's almost like going from your sophomore year to your junior year in college. I don't want a gap year. I don't want to travel. We want to keep the momentum, but this is the next big, it's almost like declaring your major. But it's important enough to me that I don't want to negatively impact the operating budget that we currently are looking at. And I think we can commit Harvard funds for that. I think it would be a great use to earmark those. My initial intention of putting in this year's budget before the discussions and as the budget evolved was to make sure it was identified and that we would have a predictable funding for it. But I'm prepared, if it's important enough to me that I'm prepared to cover it through Harvard and maybe leave it in the budget with a small placeholder so that we know that we have it. So that in a couple of years from now, we're not trying to think, oh, why did it go from 0 for 5 years and all of a sudden it's a need. But I know what, Marty, you said that, the budgets, we're at 1.9. I don't know what the other departments are coming in. If you take off $10,000, we're probably 1.5 without the 4,000 from the travel. I think that's a reasonable budget without at any year. I know we're talking about increases in potentially in contractual costs, but that's a pretty minimal budget. And I think we've done a good job trying to implement and maintain the services that we have. So I appreciate any support on this budget, but I'm willing to make some reasonable amends to it to make sure that we meet the objectives that we're seeking.
Yeah, Chief, and I'm going to go, Lisa, I'm going to kick it to you in just a second. I disagree with almost nothing that you just said, and I agree that it is a lean budget. It is, again, my mindset is that FY23, is punching us in the mouth, and it is a year where, from a budget standpoint, any increase will and should be scrutinized, and anything new is got a particularly difficult sell for me, and I suspect it's going to have a particularly difficult sell for the taxpayers. And again, I think a lot of our budgets are going to come in lean. I think the message has been heard loud and clear. Again, the problem isn't a spending problem for us this time around. It's an allocation of the tax base problem. And I applaud you for coming in with a budget that with contractual increases is below 2%. That is terrific management. That is a terrific budget proposal. But that doesn't mean that to the extent we can drive it down and delay things for a year, pay for them in a bridge year, carrying forward your college analogy, use it as a bridge year and get us to FY24 when hopefully things have changed for the better. And I think folks will remember that they were in there and you took them out for a good reason.
So would it be reasonable to believe that if we were to make some adjustments in the accreditation line and the out-of-state travel, that overall there's support for the budget? And then I guess we could have the fall discussion. Is there support to move with accreditation if we find or we use funds from Harvard to cover that gap year?
I will let the chair speak to that, but mine is a very qualified yes, because we're early in the budget cycle.
Okay.
And there's nothing nothing critical about your budget. As I said, it's as almost as lean as it possibly could be. It's a lean budget, but we haven't heard from other folks yet. And so I'll always, I'll never commit too early. How's that?
Yeah. No, that's understandable. Thank you.
All right, Lisa, all yours.
Great. Thank you, Marty. So the reason that the chief and I had the discussion was, and again, as I said, I know that this is important to the chief in moving the department forward, but it was just finding a way. And one of the things I had said to the chief was, from my perspective anyway, was when I get asked the question, that's kind of why I did the analysis that I did, was when I get asked the question, why is there no one else in Massachusetts doing it? Why is it so important for us? And I don't disagree with Marty saying, you know, being at the forefront isn't always a bad thing. It's just looking at this budget year and looking at the exercise that we went through on any additions to the budget, trying to keep a level service. I'm going to screw this up when I say it, but a level service. I know it's not level service. Am I right? No. Yeah. Okay. Level service. Thank you. I always screwed that up. So in trying to keep to that sheet, I look at the $181,000 that we already looked at, and we've already put the $30,000 for the dispatcher back in. So in trying to keep with being cognizant of, obviously, Chief, you've done a great job on keeping the budget lean, but, you know, being able to answer to the taxpayers on why this year and why it's important. And I think taking it out of the operating budget just, to me, made sense to be able to do it that way. You can still move forward with your plan and the direction you want to go with the department. So obviously that made a lot of sense to me in the discussion, and it was some level of a turning point for me in the discussion, was finding a way to do this. I think a lot of things are going to be a tough sell for town meeting this year. I really do. And I think there's going to be a lot of questions on a lot of things. And so I guess I will some level of leave it at that. But as I said as well to the chief, this is nothing to do about him or the job he's doing and how much we appreciate what he's doing and the path he's going in. It's just finding what makes sense for this year, because again, everybody, large or small, 10,000 to your budget may be, you know, make a big difference, but it may be $100 or $200 we're talking about from somebody else. Ultimately, the taxpayers benefit from this. And I think that's the ultimate goal. So I thank you for that. We'll go around. We'll see if anyone has any further comments or questions for the chief on this piece. Regarding the budget, chief, before we get to the strategic plan, I think we've already taken care of the accreditation piece. We'll zip around again. We'll start with Sam. Do you have anything further?
No, again, I think that accreditation, I think, is important, and I'm less focused on how it gets done, but then it gets done. I'm a little disappointed that here we have someone who comes in with a budget proposal under 2%, and we try to extract another 10K from him, 14K. So that's, in my view, somewhat negative reinforcement, but I understand others' points of view on that one. So I clearly am outvoted. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Andrew?
I don't have anything further.
Okay. Was it Brown Chelsea?
So just to clarify, it's 1.9% without CBAs.
Yes.
Okay, so I get the 1.9. I still stand by my statement from earlier. We still have contract negotiations on the table. Okay. Can we talk about civil defense before we move off budget?
Yes.
Okay, so I did get a chance to review that one as well. And my concern around that is increasing part-time salaries by $4,000 for, in addition to a stipend for the SEMA, CERT, FEMA, all the title representative. So my concern with that is, it is a union employee that holds that position now. Doesn't need to be a union position. So in the future, if it wasn't, then how would we deal with paying this person? And so I think it should either be part-time salaries or a stipend. I'm not in favor of doing both. And
Chief,
the chief and I talked about it. So Chief, if you want to give an update on.
Sure. again, it's kind of hard to separate them, right? This is the emergency management or civil defense budget. It funds a number of things for, I think, it's pretty evident, especially over the last 2 years, that it's more than paid for itself, whether it's been a pandemic or getting ready for a hurricane. And again, I didn't design this. We're fortunate that we have a member of the fire department that's does the primary work. I'm the emergency management director. There's no funds in there for me. And I don't know if tonight's a good forum to talk about stipends, what they mean and what they don't mean. I don't believe the stipends cover all the time commitment. That's I think stipends are for the responsibility and the level of responsibility that person holds, no matter who they are. But the fire department's been subsidizing funding for time spent working for emergency management, CERT, and MRC for that position. And if the fire department doesn't cover it, where does it come from? I think it's more a cost center where it gets allocated. Is it going to always be that position that gets the stipends? I can't say it will always be, or even throughout a year. But I don't think it's appropriate that the fire department subsidizes that time spent. Fortunately, this past 2 years, a lot of it has been reimbursable. So I don't think we're going to spend a lot of money out of that $926 now. But I think it's appropriate to allocate it where it belongs. And I think that for $4,000 to make sure we can cover that would be appropriate. If not, which on our previous conversations, I think there'll be some concerns if I raise the overtime budget in the fire department to cover it. But I would request that move out of that line and go into the fire department budget.
So just to follow up on that, one of my concerns was, I believe that expenses should lie where they should. And so I was looking for an offset to the fire department overtime, and there wasn't. So that's what kind of raised the red flag for me, is it didn't transition over. And then the chief explained that there's been reimbursement allocation from FEMA related to this position. I just think it's a large increase for that particular budget without an offset. So I'm not there on this one.
Okay, we'll go around the horn. Mr. Dennington.
I don't have anything on this one. I really mostly just focus on the police and the fire, but not the civil defense. So I'm not really, I'm glad Chelsea raised this issue, but I need to think more about it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Healy?
Yeah, I hear both sides of it. And I'll keep thinking about it.
Yeah.
I think
Mr. Stivers.
both sides make reasonable points though. So that's where I am.
Mr. Stivers.
I admire Mr. Healy's legal skills of arguing all sides of the issue. I'm less sophisticated. I'm for this. I support it. Thank you.
So this was one of the things when Andrew and I had met with the chief, we had asked about, and we had talked about as well. I think I'm also confused as to why there's a stipend and then there's part-time salaries. I'd like to know exactly. So I know what goes on with certain MRC and being a member. So I'd like to know exactly what goes in that we think on top of the stipend, and the stipend would obviously be used towards the time, why we think there's another $5,000. So again, I just like further clarification. We can certainly come back to this. I think your biggest hurdle on your, your fire budget is done. But on this, if we could just get some further clarification besides maybe certain MRC and some of the things that are being done for SEMA and potentially as emergency management, would they still also, depending on what they are, still be covered and reimbursable by FEMA even after the fact? And has it happened in prior years? So I'm just trying to figure out how we get to the $5,000 number.
And just for reference, it may not be this evening. If you look at the last year's annual budget report, kind of reviews what SEMA does.
Okay.
There's a position that basically does majority of the grants, all the planning. And like with any other stipend positions that we have in the fire department, not all of it can be done when you're working. It can't be done. Emergency management is even more so because there are a lot of state and regional requirements, and the position covers those responsibilities. Currently, the person resides in the fire department, so they get paid overtime to do that. If it's in addition. Again, I can't debate the stipends. The stipends exist. In my 3 years here, they do not cover the whole time responsibility of the positions that they get stipends for. It's just, I don't know. And we tried to raise the stipends last year with no success. And that's why this option of making sure that we could cover it. There are some other times that other employees may have time that they have to commit to this. So that's really the number. But I think if you looked at last year's annual report, and this year it's going to come out, I can send it to you. We forward it to Melanie. That's a very active, time-consuming position.
Okay, Chief, if you could do that, I think kind of the consensus is just, some more information, some more time to kind of dwell over this, and, we'll bring this back up for future discussion. So
Thank you.
Awesome. That would be great. And that leads us to the strategic plan. So Chief, I will turn the floor over to you.
So thankfully, I'm not going to read the plan. I think all of you have a copy of it, and I just want to do some highlights, and then that will lead into a really quick accreditation discussion. Not that we need any more of that one tonight. But basically, the strategic plan is a means that we can establish direction, predictability, and accountability for the department, the members, to be transparent to the community. It's called community driven for a reason. It was very imperative in the model that we followed is the accreditation model, that we involved the community heavily. There was a committee that was put in place, and I think we're seeing benefits day to day and long term. So much like other departments have done strategic planning, we think it's important, and I think that it would be beneficial if the select board, officially said, we acknowledge that you have a strategic plan, and now we know some of the bigger issues in some of the areas that the department's going to focus on. If you look at the plan, we did external community and internal employee feedback. That was kind of the foundation of this plan. Through that, we also did some breakouts with every member of the department on what our mission, vision, and values are and what they're going to be. But Mr. Dennington can speak to this. Once we knew what internally and externally was going on, we did that. What's called a SWOT analysis. It's used in industry: strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, and threats. And we were able to, through that, identify critical issues and service gaps in the Southborough Fire Department. And once we could identify those, we were able to prioritize those. What things could we actually address, and what were some of the more important aspects of the department that both the citizens, the community at large, and the membership wanted to focus on. So that really comes down to identifying some strategic initiatives. If you look through the plan, you'll see that our strategic initiatives focused on officer development, training, staffing, community outreach, and behavioral mental health. And through those, we identified goals and objectives. So basically holding our feet to the fire of having a plan, not just that we're going to do it, but who's going to do it, what specific steps they have to take. And I think what's important to everybody is what's the cost of that. So over the next 5 years, we're hoping to address all of them. We have some in the to-do box if we address them. But anytime that we're trying to focus on where we're at, these are the core things we're going to work on. And each of them may have multiple steps and multiple implications, but this board, the other boards, and the community can be assured that we'll have to vet this out with research and cost analysis. And then it would be a policy decision of whatever oversight board or the board of selectmen would have on what does that mean. So we got a lot of buy-in, a lot of commitment from our members, some very honest and sometimes uncomfortable feedback from both the community and our internal members. I think this is a solid plan for the next 5 years. It's our playbook. Doesn't mean things aren't going to come up all of a sudden, like COVID or something else where we have to address or capital item. But I think always this will be the playbook we'll run off for the next 5 years. So I'll leave that at that. But if there is kind of universal acknowledgement of this board, we're prepared to start implementing it.
Great. Thank you, Chief. And you're right. This is pretty solid and pretty comprehensive. Andrew, I'm going to start with you. I know that you took part in this. If there's anything you want to add, anything you think that, that may be useful for the board to know, obviously I would assume you're in support of it, through the process. So I give you the floor.
Sure. I would make one comment, which really echoes what Sam was saying before, that participating in these meetings really did show me how you can see a positive effect on morale of the meetings, the strategic planning meetings that we had. And I think it was good to have, there were different levels of the department represented. I know you had an on-call firefighter as well, and discussed officer development and response times, trainings. So I think it was a very positive exercise, and I applaud the chief for doing it.
Thank you, Ms. Mel. Sorry, Mr. Stivers.
Thanks, and thanks, Chief. I think there's a good job on this. Great to have this kind of document out there for not only the public, but for the department staff to be able to see in terms of direction you're going in. A couple of questions. One, did you do any analysis around budget implications for these initiatives going forward? A lot of things that you're proposing to do, and obviously some of these are going to cost some money going forward. Is there anything that's in here that's a real budget buster? Well, it wasn't clear to me that there was, but it would be interesting to know if you see something really big in there.
Mr. Stivers, is really, it's premature to say that, and that's part of the design of a strategic plan is we don't know what the answers are yet. We know what the gaps are, and we know what some of the areas. So often when you look at the goals and objectives, you'll see actual hardcore what we need to do. And a lot of it will be based on data analysis and industry best practices, standards. And only then would we be able to start formulating costs associated. The good part is when we present options or opportunities, you can be assured that we'll vet out the cost so that that's part of the discussion. I think a good example is it was before the strategic plan, but we knew through a standard cover that we had a gap in coverage. We needed a tender. but we had other options. What were other options for water supply in certain areas? So we vetted those out, and basically we looked at the cost impact of all of those. So we found that the tender, through the research and this process, was the best option. I think that's going to be applied for every initiative you see, that staffing might be a cost, but what ways do we do staffing based on demand, resiliency, gaps? And it may not be adding 10 more people to the fire department. It might be a different staffing model. And only once we know the staffing model would we know what the costs are. So I'm hoping that when we do present over the next 5 years any initiative or how to address it, it's been vetted out so that you're getting real numbers, whatever they may be, and options that you or the future boards will be able to decide.
But nothing you've seen so far that says, wow, this is going to be a huge budget issue that we.
I'm not going to say that tonight. No, I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. But again, I'm a big fan of strategic planning, and I think it's great that you have the process in place. And as you suggest, if things occur down the road that you don't anticipate now, you've got a process in place, a structure within which you can deal with those things. So that's great. My only other comment is that as I looked at the implementation steps, your name appears to be the point person for a large portion of these. So are you planning on not sleeping for the next?
I didn't know who did that. No. Often
I think Andrew did it, didn't he?
Often, yeah, Andrew did. Often when it has to do with some of the research, finances, human resources, it's appropriate. But I can tell you that you'll often see what's called working group chair that will have some responsibility. I look at lead position as more facilitator. So my goal is to get others to that, and we have. I think Mr. Denning saw this, that we have a lot of people that are interested and invested in this, that that will too evolve.
Good. All right, good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stivers. Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you. Chief, nice job on the strategic plan. I do have one question as it in terms of internal and external feedback, in terms of the survey information that you did. Do you have a plan to continue on a regular basis to implement surveys like that to kind of see how you're doing, or would you wait until you do your next 5-year strategic plan?
And again, I'm going to reference the accreditation model because that's what we're following. Looks to on a regular basis evaluate and assess all your different components. So I envision that this will be more of an annual, every 2-year process, because we might think we know what's the best, but the changing environment, what else is out there? So it will evolve. So I envision that we'll be doing this not 5 years from now, but on a regular basis.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Haley.
I'm good. Good process, good plan. Thanks, Chief.
You're welcome.
Yep, I second those thoughts. Do you need anything more than, I think it's pretty clear, straw poll here. Everybody's in support with you moving forward and implementing this. Do you need a vote of the board to move this forward? That's a Mr. Purple question.
A vote would be nice because it would be on record. And okay. It would hold over multiple boards if for some reason this is not the group in 2 years that we're still doing this.
Okay, I think Mr. Healy will be happy to make that motion.
So moved.
Second.
All right, perfect. Roll call. Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski. Mr. Healy.
Oh, that's right. I moved and I say aye. Yes.
Okay. And Ms. Brascio, I think.
And really this, I appreciate that. And I will just spend a short time on the accreditation because it dovetails into it. Again, I'm not going to read it verbatim. I forwarded this board, kind of our accreditation project description and budget. So I'll focus on that component. We've completed there's three components to the accreditation process globally. Community risk assessment and standard cover, which we did and we're updating again. Strategic planning, second component. And the third component, which is probably the biggest and heaviest lift, is the self-assessment. I shared with Ms. Malinowski just the overview of that self-assessment. It's over 200 performance indicators, probably 50 core competencies, if not more. It's going to take some time. So it's a good opportunity right now. Is to date, we are what and I'll say the Commission on Fire Accreditation, which is a national organization, we are a registered agency that says we are interested. We spent less than $1,000, like $650. We had access to resources from the CFAI, the Commission on Fire Accreditation. They had some requirements. We fulfilled those, and we're working on their model. So we're not just making this up. We're following a model. We're at a crossroads where we have to decide if we want to move forward. I think we've had that discussion already, and that's the applicant phase. That means you have 18 months to complete the bulk of your accreditation requirements. The good part is we got 2 of them done. We have 18 months to do the self-assessment manual. It, based on our population, is $6,650. So that's the cost we're looking for FY23. I think based on our previous conversation, we'll cover that out of Harvard. And once you're an applicant agency, there's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of people involved. Other departments we have to reach out to. We've already reached out to finance, police department, public works. So overall, I think there's a distinct benefit of this process. If that's successful, we would seek to be a candidate applicant, which means we're ready to move forward. That is when a peer review team would be brought in on site, and they would verify and validate all of our documents and all of our processes. They would interview board members, members of the department, members of other departments. And what they're trying to do is validate and verify what we said we're doing. And if they believe we are ready to be a candidate to move forward to the commission, they would let us know. And I can tell you that this is purely voluntary on our part, and it's not guaranteed. But if we get that far, we would be required to go to one of their hearings, which is typically twice a year at their conferences. And we would basically be in front of the hearing board, the commission, to determine if we're going to receive accreditation. The cost for that, again, that's probably in FY24, is the cost to cover for the peer assessment team, because they don't get paid. You just have to cover their expenses. And they usually come from out of the region, because they don't want people that are from in the region and be somewhat jaded. They want them to be just really good peer reviewers. And there's a cost for us to go to the conference, to the board hearing. So I think in the paperwork I said it was around, they said budget around 6,000 plus 1,500 for our members of the department. And that's where I believe Mr. Stivers came up with, that's like 7,500 in FY24. In FY23 is about 6,600. I also provided links to the accreditation sites. I think this is important. how's it going to affect us? And what is as I'm a resident, how's it going to affect me? How's it going to affect you and the community? Currently, from following the model, we've been able to establish greater community alignment. We've kind of been forced to engage the community. We've identified service gaps through the strategic plan and ways to address it, specifically professional development, training, and succession planning. The thing that really matters, which you may not know, is we've reduced response times over the last year by a minute. And that's through communicating and monitoring performance and also tracking it. And I will tell you that minute that we shaved off matters, and we're hoping to shave off more. We're making data supported decisions. So anything that gets presented to this board, the advisory capital, or a town meeting, there's a formal process that we're following. And then I think the bigger thing is we're incorporating performance-based budgeting. That's our approach. Accreditation can be thought of as something short-term. I talked to Ms. Brascia about this. She made reference to White River Junction, Vermont, as being accredited. I know them very well. Their leaders are very close friends of mine. They did this close to 20 years ago. They've been an accredited agency, and they have continuity of expectations from the community, elected officials, and the department that have lasted 3 chiefs. I hope, I have a short time, hopefully not real short, but I have a short time in Southborough relatively. I'm here because maybe there wasn't continuity of expectations. That's why this is important to me. That's why it was one of my goals, and it's been consistent. My goal since I've been here is that this sets a level expectation of your fire department, and aligns it with the community. So it should outlast me, and it should outlast this board. And only time will tell the value. But when budgets go up and down, when pressures get on departments, pressures come on towns, I think this is going to matter, because at the end, somebody's going to have to make a policy decision on what we're doing, but you need to do it based on really good, solid information and data and best practices. And by doing this, somebody will verify that we're doing that. So that's accreditation.
All right, thank you, Chief. Any questions, comments? I think we kind of covered a lot of this prior. I see nothing. You don't need a vote from us, I assume, to continue on to part 3, step 3 of what you need to do?
I do not, but I know I'll be working with Mark and probably you, Lisa, that at some point we're going to have some authorization. When we move the applicant phase, they want to make sure the community knows about it, so that we'll probably look for some level of approval or authorization to participate, because it is a big step. And if you feel comfortable, I think it's something both between Mr. Purple and yourself could manage.
Okay. Whatever you need.
And I'll leave it with this. I appreciate the opportunity that I had online and offline with all of you. I know you're going to speak to other things later on. I enjoy being here. I enjoy being a resident, and I appreciate this continued support and what you challenged me to do. I appreciate it. So thank you.
All right, go ahead, Marty.
Chief, did you or somebody related to you do those drawings behind you?
Yes.
Wow. Who?
I did.
Wow. Another
So
talent.
if you
Very
need a fundraiser,
impressive.
I'll leave them for sale. If you,
My eye has been on those. Very talented. Thanks.
I'll have to share some more with you. So thank you.
Can you fund accreditation by selling them?
I'm not that famous yet.
I'll buy one, Chief. How's that?
Okay. Thank you, guys.
All right, wonderful, Chief. Thank you for coming
Right.
tonight. We appreciate it.
All
Good
right,
night.
good night, guys.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you, everyone. Next is under reports. Just as under a chair's report, I just wanted to give an update that on January 8th, the Hate Has No Home had a peace vigil. It was the day after our big snowstorm, and it was on St. Mark's Field. It was cold, very, very cold and snowy. We stomped the snow down as best we could. There was actually a very nice turnout for it. It was a celebration of community, basically, for going into 2022. It was all about positivity. Senator Eldridge was there. Father LaBelle, obviously Ms. Gillespie spoke. Safdar Medina spoke. And some of the things I was asked to speak, and some of the things I kind of touched on was some of the amazing things that have taken place during COVID, which has been such a devastating thing for so many people. I touched on, as Ms. Malinowski had mentioned, the community fridge, and some amazing efforts that are taking place. The rent and mortgage program that this board was able to partake in and make use of CARES funds and help 9 or 10 families. The community effort that took place in Families Helping Families, with a group of women in town coming together and on Facebook, starting a group to basically, if you needed help getting an appointment, they would help you do it. They did this on their own time. They had their own lives, their own families, their own jobs. And that continued over to COVID and trying to find tests for people to be able to find appointments for the PCRs. It just was some amazing things, people coming together to help families devastated by fires. So it was really a great event to celebrate our community and how we all come together. And it was just a great way to start the year. We sang a song. I'm sure that's memorable for people. I'm not a great singer, but again, it was just a wonderful event. It was celebrated by all those that came, and the feeling and the sentiment was something we should all be proud of. So I will just thank Ms. Gillespie for spearheading that, and again, a wonderful opportunity for our town. So that's all that I have. I see nothing under members' reports.
Sorry, I just have one
Oh, go
thing.
ahead.
Mr. Stivers and I are on for office hours next Tuesday, in case anybody's listening. So I'm very excited to start those again. So I think we'll probably have somebody tweet that this week.
Okay, Chelsea, what is the time again? Just so those that may be watching.
6, Sam?
We did 6 last time, yeah, so.
Okay, so 6 to 7.
Yep.
And how will there be a link on the website for
Yes.
people to zoom into?
Yes, we'll make sure that's up there.
Okay, that's perfect. Great.
Oh, and
Okay.
Vanessa just confirmed, yes, 6 to 7, and she's on it.
All right, great. Thank you,
Thanks,
Chelsea.
Vanessa.
All right, Town Administrator's Report, Mr. Purple.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I'd known where you were going to go with your report, I might have flipped it so we could have ended on your stuff with that feel-good feeling would have carried right through the rest of the meeting. So most of the stuff is in your packet, but I'll be brief. As you know, we've continued with our budget, our group budget discussions, which has a representative of this board, representative of advisory, representative of capital, our finance team, and also the school superintendent, assistant superintendent, and also the school committee chair, and just to make sure that we're all in alignment with and we understand where people are with their budgets. At the last meeting, and I know that Mr. Ballantyne had sent something out to the board. I know you get a lot of things through. I wanted to make sure that acknowledge that you saw it. The K-8 budget is going to be officially voted in another couple of weeks. I believe February 8th was the date. But the recommended budget the superintendent has brought forward has been reduced from the original, I think it was close to 4.5 to 2.5, 2.53. That change in and of itself is almost $500,000 reduction. So if you plug that number now into our budget and the information that Mr. Ballantyne sent you, without any shift in our value, that brings our budget down to 3.91% increase for fiscal 23. If you add the 10% shift that the board has discussed on top of that, it brings it up to about a 5.68. Again, a lot of moving parts still in that. We still have the 333,000 in free cash that we've set aside that the board will need to determine what they want to do. There's still there's still the full allocation of request of road money. I know capital is meeting on Monday. They're going to be taking up a couple of other items and reviewing their recommendations for capital and having a meeting with Ms. Galligan. Does not include, as we've talked about tonight, does not include any increases for any CBA negotiations. And, but I think, we're in a lot better spot than we were when we started, and especially looking at this shift. So I just want to make sure the board was aware that, we continue to move in the right direction. We're also looking at getting ourselves closer to a final position on health insurance that hopefully is going to result in, some additional savings as well.
Mark, can I ask you one question before you move off budget?
Sure.
The 3.91, does that include the 181 that the board used for our exercise for level service?
Yes, that includes
So-
everything because it's not officially been taken out. So yes, there's still,
Okay.
that's another, thank you for reminding me. That's also in there as well. So all the new things, the new dispatcher, the new part-time inspector for building, all of those things are still in there. So there are paths to further reduce, this number. I'm not sure we're going to get it down to a 1 or 2, but there are paths to reduce it further. I was asked by a member of the board just to talk a little bit about the, where we are in terms of the ADA study that was completed last year. And was hoping to be a little bit further with it at this point. We did apply for the grant funds for the ADA grant, and which would have provided us a lot of the signage and the hardware to change out the handles and everything on doors to make them compliant in our buildings. Unfortunately, a lot of people applied and not enough money to satisfy everything, and we did not receive those. And so facilities has continued to do some improvements as we're able to do them in terms of some of the low hanging fruit, addressing egresses that we're able to do. They're looking to John Parent's done a nice job and has taken the report and put together a spreadsheet which basically lists out each item and what items have either been done and what items are intended to do before the end of this fiscal year. And then obviously we have the remaining items. And I can provide the board a copy of that so that you can see, where we're going with that. I also had a conversation with Tim Davis, because if you look at that report, most of the items in the buildings, the big ticket items are bathrooms. But outside of the building, when you look at the field, it's access and egress to the fields and around the fields. Those are your big ticket items. And Recreation Commission is reviewing a draft response and how they hope to manage some of these things. I think they're hoping that they can handle some of the smaller items in the reports, but obviously with the larger items, they're going to need some help. I think that since we're looking at access, which is pretty much going to be, very similar on a lot of the fields, I think it makes sense. It's going to be a capital item, so we need to involve capital in the discussions and talk about slotting them. And I can see if the capital chair be willing to add something else on to their meeting for the 24th. It's already getting kind of full, just as to how we want to approach this. Do we want to approach it as an omnibus access number and take a look at designing a lot of these things and maybe, as Mr. Healy has said in previous meetings, getting a lot of this stuff shovel ready and have the designs and everything ready to go. And as funding becomes available, we can take things off and bring them forward. So, we are looking at that. ADA committee, which is now the Public Accessibility Committee, has asked for a $50,000 earmark for ADA improvements in the budget. And I've asked Mr. Parent to take a look at how that is going to be, how we would anticipate utilizing that, with our buildings. And then maybe, we take a look at, identifying a playground, a field or something in that to focus our efforts on to remediate some of the issues there. So still very much a work in progress, but we're moving in the right direction. The
Mark?
Board of Health.
Mark, can I ask a question about the ADA?
Absolutely. I didn't see the hand. Sorry.
All right. Just a question. You mentioned the new Public Accessibility Committee. Have they weighed in on priorities for how we address the issues from the report? I would think there's a lot of expertise there, and I've not heard much from them recently.
Yeah, they have not. I'm not aware that they've met. Since they've been reconstituted from ADA committee to public accessibility. I agree that their input, would be important to understand where they think things should go for some of these things. And I think the larger issues, Sam, was where it's going to be important as to, do we want to address things that, as Mooney, make more sense to address, is there an order to try to do some of these things? So I agree.
Exactly.
I think their inputs would be important.
I'd be interested in their view of that, not necessarily that they should, drive the process exclusively, but again, I think there's a lot of expertise there that could be helpful. So maybe a nudge to them to ask them to meet and provide some input would be useful. Thanks.
I'm happy to nudge. Thank you. So as I was saying, Board of Health recently passed a townwide face covering mandate, and it was effective as of January 13th. And the board intends to revisit it within 30 days. I think that there's been a lot of push on this. It's out on our website. It's out through social media. And we've tried to make sure that this gets around pretty good. I know that in our town buildings, public coming in and everything, and that the public has been extremely respectful of the requirement. I've seen very, very few people who don't, and some people come in and they forget. Miss Berry is happy to hand them a mask. So it's actually worked out well. I don't know if the chair, Board of Health, has any comment.
Nope, we'll be revisiting on February 8th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I did want to note, surprised the chief didn't do that while he was here, and talk. It just basically announced that the town was awarded some grant money from the Executive Office of Public Safety, about almost $15,000 in firefighter safety equipment. The information is in your packet. Again, it's just, it's great to get funding for some of these things, and it's great to, to be able to, make it worthwhile. And, we appreciate the efforts. I think it's important for us to get grants, but I think it's important for us to be able to specifically identify, what it is we're going to want and be able to understand the path forward for the money that we get. So kudos to the chief for doing that. The final piece is, I should have listed it as a Selectman Stivers item, but this is in your packet is the approval letter from Conservation to allow the paving of the golf access road and parking lot. This is something that we've had a lot of comments on, from people that, it'd be great if we could great if we could pave it. And Karen Galligan's comment is then great. Now we have another surface to plow. But it is something, we, took a look at the stormwater calculations, and Conservation was satisfied that paving them would be within those parameters. So my intention is to try to work with Ms. Galligan to see if we can't tack this into a paving contract in some way, shape, or form to get this done. You do have a fairly good chunk of money in your golf revolving fund. It can only be spent on golf. And so unless the board disagrees, I'm going to move forward to try and get this done sometime in the next paving season, hopefully early.
Sounds great to me.
Okay, that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Purple. Moving on to consent agenda. We'll just go down the list. Does anyone want to hold A?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. B, accept Harvard donation. Nope. Okay, I'm going to hold C. D, accept donation for youth and family services. Any holds on that? Nope. Okay. E, letter of support for Mass Trails grant application. I see no holds there. F, I'm going to hold that one myself. And G is release unredacted March 23rd, 2019 executive session minutes. Okay. That being said, do we have a motion to approve consent agenda items? B, accept Harvard donation of $24,963 for police and fire. D, accept donation of $500 for youth and family services. E, approve letter of support for Mass Trails grant applications. And G, release unredacted March 23rd, 2019 executive session minutes.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Roll call. Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Mr. Healy.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
And Ms. Braccio. Aye. Thank you very much for those. Mr. Stivers, on to minutes.
Right. Line 59, in the spirit of gender accuracy, I would request being referred to as Mr. Stivers instead of Miss Stivers. And that's it for me.
All right. Have any other changes? I see none. All right. Do we have a motion to approve open session meeting minutes, January 4th, 2022 as amended?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second, and I'm not going to say a thing about pronouns.
Hey,
All right.
I'm old school. I don't understand pronouns.
All right. Roll call. Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Ms. Braccio. Oh, I did it out of order. Sorry. Mr. Healy.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Great. Thank you. Sorry about that. I held C. I just wanted to thank John Boland. His resignation from the golf course committee. He has been very instrumental in many ways and for many years and doing many different things. And I just wanted to publicly thank him on behalf of the board for all his years of service to the town.
And
So,
Lisa, I would second that too, because I've followed John's activities on the golf course committee pretty closely. I think he did a great job there, and as his letter points out, I think he leaves a list of suggestions that are very good suggestions that I hope the current committee will pay careful attention to. So
One of them was just acted upon, right?
on paving. Yeah,
Yes, fixing the deplorable condition of the access road.
exactly.
Just-
awesome. Great. Thank you. So do we have a motion to accept the resignation of John Boland from the golf course committee?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call. Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Mr. Healy.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
And Ms. Braccio. Aye. Thank you. That takes us down to item F. And I had held this one. I just wanted to share with the board that I had a conversation with Mr. Purple about this and the process and wanting to make sure that we were consistent and transparent as possible as we move through the process. When this initially started for the OPM, the Capital Committee was involved, and they were public interviews that were done, and a recommendation was given. When it went through the design services, Capital really didn't play a role in that. So I just had a conversation about Mark Howe going forward. And I think the path is there. There's no policy change or anything that needs to happen. I think, again, it was a great conversation with Mark and I appreciate it. And just knowing as we go forward, there's a better process in place is all. So I just held it for that reason. I just wanted to update the board that I had a concern that was shared and resolved. So if there's no other comments, then do we have a motion to accept the OPM's recommendation for architect for the townhouse renovation project?
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
and Ms. Braccio. Aye. Thank you very much. Takes us down to other matters. Consideration of contract to manage EEA grant. Mr. Purple, you would ask to put this on the agenda. We'll start with you. Thank you.
Well, I had wanted the board to at least be aware, which is why an email went out to the board. Originally, when we talked about the EE grant, I had some conversations with the chair, Rob Anderson, and the understanding, because the board was interested as to the in-kind, how is this going to work? And the conversations I had with the chair were that the coordinator, Ms. Munsif, was going to manage the contract. And then EDC took a vote that they wanted to contract this position, and have somebody else manage the grant. And therefore, they were changing course on how they wanted to do this. So I simply wanted to inform the board, look, things have changed based on what I told you last time. And I did receive some comments back that, that there may be, some additional discussions that some people wanted to have, and that, so felt it was good to at least put it on the agenda and let the board discuss or have your questions, so I have a clear direction. If no one had come back with any issues and everyone said, yep, you know what, we're fine with how EDC wants to approve with this, then I would have moved everything forward. But I did think that, if the board wanted to have some comment and everything, they should have that opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Purple. So we'll go around. Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you. So I actually do have a few questions and thoughts on this one. At a more broad level in terms of the grant, I don't think we know as of yet how much a wastewater consultant would cost. And so part of my concern with this is it's a $45,000 grant, and we're allocating up to $7,500 for a project manager. So I would like to see more of the grant go towards kind of the wastewater portion. And I mean, this is a much, in my mind, this is a much larger project, and could have a big upswing in terms of revenue for the town. So I think that this is, a broader scope than what we saw with downtown. And I think that it also reaches, not that downtown didn't reach a lot of different boards and committees, but I think, some of the lessons learned from that, at least from my perspective, is to get more collaboration on the front side and, kind of all moving together at the same time. I think this plays into the one-stop as well. So I think there's a lot of moving parts with this. And I'm just concerned that we're not putting as much into the, I'm just concerned that we're shortchanging on the wastewater piece by, putting a contract together. And then when I actually looked at the proposed contract, I had some concerns, especially after the other EEA grant that we had, that were kind of having some creep outside of what a consultant should do. And if you look at the scope of services shall encompass the following, this is on page 119 of our packet. The third bullet on research, write, and distribute RFPs for wastewater study, secure approval, send RFPs to appropriate vendors, consultants, review responses, and award contracts. I just think that with some of the other contracts that were signed, I was concerned kind of after the fact, we didn't necessarily get involved in the details, but I think we have a procurement process in town that I think we should follow. And to my knowledge, a consultant would not have the authority to award a contract. So I just have some concerns on some of these tasks. I mean, I think, it seems like and I did get a chance to watch the EDC meeting, I think some of the concerns are around the quarterly reports that they don't necessarily want to tie up the EDC coordinator with. So I'd be more open to maybe having the contractor perform the quarterly reports for a flat fee, during the duration of this grant. But I would like to see kind of some more collaboration with other boards and committees, and have the bulk of the, portion go to the wastewater, understanding that we would still have in-kind services from the EDC coordinator, the town accountant, procurement officer, DPW. So planning, I think there's a lot of town employees that would contribute to the in-kind portion. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Ms. Malinowski. Mr. Healy.
I agree with that. I mean, it's a significant amount of the grant award, and it might be entirely justifiable, but from what has been presented up until now, I can't make that conclusion. So I guess I would want to hear what is your thought, Chelsea, to have the chair of the EDC come in for a discussion, or because we got to figure out a way to move it forward.
Right. I mean, it seemed like the thing that they were concerned about the most was the quarterly report. And I just think there's some blurred lines between responsibilities. So yeah, I think having EDC in to talk through that, and then maybe we could, I mean, I'd like to see, and if they're not the appropriate group to do this, then maybe we should, is to like go out to bid for a wastewater consultant and see how much that's going to cost before we kind of tie our hands with a project manager.
Yeah, again, it is the services for the most part seem reasonable to me and necessary. I guess I would want to hear why some of those can't be handled by the EDC coordinator, or honestly, maybe Mark, part of a broader discussion. Maybe there's somebody else in the townhouse who can take on some responsibilities, because again, every correct me if I'm wrong, but every hour we can allocate to somebody who's already being paid by the town frees up money from the grant, because
Correct.
It goes towards our match. And the more services we allocate on an hourly basis, the more that eats into what the primary focus of the grant is going to be. So and again, I haven't seen the EDC meeting where they discussed this. I haven't looked at that one. And maybe they've gone through a fulsome, inquiry and discussion about why these hours are necessary. But I guess I'd like to see that. Again, Claire's done terrific work for the town in the past. I'm sure she would continue to do so in the future. It's just the percentage of the allocation that troubles me a little bit, just because it's so much of the grant.
So Marty, I will just jump in and just let you know that EDC, when I had spoken to the chair, Rob Anderson, we talked about coming in on February 1st meeting anyway to discuss the Selectmen EDC coordination of a business initiative. So we can certainly, add this on there and continue the discussion there. But we'll still go around to the rest of the board, but I'll plan on putting that on the agenda for the 1st as a discussion item as well.
Yeah, again, with the idea, I am comfortable with the approach. I'm not comfortable with the total dollar amount that it comes to, and figuring out a way to get those hours down to something that, at least for me, would find a comfort level.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Stivers.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm generally okay with this. I think Chelsea makes some good points in terms of the value of sharpening the wording on some of this stuff. Again, I don't think that the consultant should be awarding the contract, but I think there's a danger in having too many heads on the dog. I think that hiring a vendor to actually do this study needs some careful management. And if we've got 6 people in the townhouse and others weighing in from various committees, I think you really have a danger of getting too unfocused. So having a single manager for it who has primary responsibility and who can call on some other resources for help, to me, is a much more efficient way to do it. So, but I think it's worth talking about with Mr. Anderson and others to figure out how we can sharpen the focus if folks are concerned about portion of the budget, maybe you think about segmenting it in some way to try it for 6 months, 9 months or whatever, and see how it goes. And if we're happy with how it's working and the value that we're getting for that portion of the budget, then continue. If not, maybe doing something different with it. But I think the need is substantial. I think Claire is a good person to get up to speed quickly with it, has a lot of history with the project, and with going out to somebody who's not familiar with the community, I think could really slow the process down. So, but again, I'm interested in talking with Mr. Anderson some more about it too. Thanks.
Mr. Dennington.
I am fine with the consensus which is emerging to discuss this further with Mr. Anderson at our next meeting.
Thank you. So I had also shared some of the same concerns as Chelsea, in that this project itself, as it moves forward through the feasibility studies and everyone involved, and it's much larger than the downtown was. We're talking about all of Route 9. And I think there's nothing against anybody, but I think that there's a level of oversight that someone with a wastewater consultant background might have a value in this, in forging the path ahead, because this is potentially a really large project, tying this in with the one step. And it's just making sure that, we're on the right path is all. So I shared some of Chelsea's concerns, and happy to have the discussion with EDC on the first, on how we move forward with this. And maybe we can encumber, some feedback or from the planning board and or SHOPC and or Capital during that time as well. Hopefully some conversations might be able to take place. So that being said, we will put it on for the first at this point. And Chelsea, while we're at it, if maybe in preview of that, if there's specific things within the current contract that we have in front of us that we want changed, such as awarding the contract language taken out, maybe we can get some edits to Mr. Purple on that in advance.
Yeah, and maybe Mr. Purple, you can speak to the RFP process. I mean, I know that, other boards and committees that we appoint go through your office to do those type of exercises. So, I mean, is that something that we could tap into our resources there to use?
Oh, absolutely. Everything, the RFPs would have to go through our office anyway. So absolutely, we can work with that.
Okay.
Okay, is that it? All right, let's move on to our next item. Consideration of policy on recording clerks. So in between our last meetings, I've had a couple conversations with people that had some concern on clarity. I don't believe at this point, Ms. Hale, have you heard anything from planning? I know that they had discussed it and we were supposed to be getting something. I don't know if we've received it.
I have not.
Okay, so we haven't received anything from planning. I have a suggested edit to it. We can actually put this on for our meeting on the 1st. I'd be happy to forward over to Vanessa the edit that I have for clarity, and we'll reach out to planning one more time. And at that point, we'll just accept the policy if they have nothing further to add. I watched the meeting and they discussed it, and Karina was going to put some thoughts together on it. So if the board's amenable to that, just go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I actually have some more substantial concerns about it, Lisa. As I expressed last time, I think this has evolved to a place that I guess I wasn't expecting when we started talking about it. And I've been listening to some of the meetings as folks have been talking about this from some of the other committees as well. And I mean, it seems to me that the structure as proposed is likely to both, I think, underpay people taking minutes and also potentially cost us some, we got a lot of good minute takers out there. And I think it's important to pay them fairly. And I'm not sure that this approach actually will do that. I also think there's some more additional boards that we ought to be supporting with minutes. And so, I've got a more detailed proposal that I would be happy to circulate. I'm not sure we need to take a lot of time with it now. But again, what I want to wind up with is a structure that has capable people taking minutes. It's a hard job, and to do it well, I think, requires a substantial level of skill. And if we don't pay people fairly, I think we're likely to lose some skilled people. And to me, that's sort of penny wise, pound foolish, because as we've seen, having good minutes for particularly some of the permitting boards and people who are dealing with some of the more technical financial issues, et cetera, in the town are useful. You can't tell, in advance when you're going to need them, but after the fact, if you have good minutes, it's turned out to be a very helpful structure in place. So again, I'm concerned about where we seem to be headed with it. And I have some additional thoughts that I'd like to get on the table. I don't know what the right time for that is, but.
So Sam, I'll just kind of give you my thought process on why bringing this forward was, and it was all about equity. If somebody is taking minutes on a meeting, for a 1 hour meeting, getting $150 when you have someone taking 4 and 5 hour meeting minutes for the same amount, it's just not fair. And in looking at what works, the $150 structure was basically originally based on some conversations I've had with people. It was kind of based on a 3 hour meeting as being the average. So a $50, if it's a 1 hour meeting, $50 to me to draft minutes. And I understand there's edits and everything else. I mean, we're sitting here tonight asking the fire chief to not put, his accreditation in his budget. So, but yet, again, it's for me, Sam, it was about equity. Is this the right plan? I don't know. This is what we came up with that seemed equitable to everyone. Yeah. And everybody would like minutes. How do you differentiate somebody's more important than somebody else? That's why we did the finance board, the executive board, and your permitting boards. I mean, everybody can make a case for minutes. How do you draw that line and say, we need to be fair to the taxpayers? I mean, again, I took minutes for 12 years. I mean, Capital's doing it now.
It's also, yeah. And I agree with you. Equity is important. But again, I think there are ways to do that. For example, I'd start with a sliding scale for meetings under 30 minutes. I'd pay $50. And for meetings under an hour, between half an hour and an hour, I'd pay 100. Hour to 3 hours, I'd pay 150. And I'd then add $50 for each half hour after that, up to a max of $250 for minutes. And I think that my model is that it takes about the same amount of time in the meeting, after the meeting, to actually do the minutes. And I think that for me, a reasonable pay rate after the dust settles is around $25 an hour, plus a bit of an add-on for the inconvenience of going to the meeting. So if you pay somebody $50 for a 30-minute meeting, they've got an hour's worth of work. That's $50, but yet they got to attend the meeting and disrupt their schedule and so forth. So I think for shorter meetings, it's worth a little more. And so that kind of scale to me is actually more equitable in terms of more representative of the amount of work that's involved. So again, I looked at the groups. I came up with 11 boards that I think make sense to have minutes for. My estimate is about 25 grand to do that. Some of them may actually choose to use staff where they have staff to do the minutes, and I think that's great. But again, my goal is to get good minutes where we need them. And not everybody is going to get minutes. I'm certainly prepared personally to be more arbitrary about that. I don't think you have to have a model that everybody is going to believe is right, fair, et cetera. I mean, our job is to make those kind of decisions, I think, and I think we can do that. And so, again, I think that's money well spent to get good minutes in the places we need them for more technical issues, for example, where there's money involved. So advisory, for example, is not a permitting board. On the other hand, they make a lot of important decisions and recommendations, and I think having good minutes there is worth some money as well. So, but again, we talked about it a number of times, and I'm happy to circulate what my proposal would be if folks are interested in talking about it. Folks have talked about it enough. I understand. Reasonable people can disagree reasonably. So.
No,
I'm ready to move on. But,
I agree, Sam. If if the board wants to have one more go round with this, and and have Sam's proposal come, I just I will disagree with you, Sam, on the inconvenience of coming to a meeting. That's the job. That's right. What a minute taker is supposed to do. So to compensate somebody extra for that just makes no sense to me. I mean, Mark drives from Shrewsbury to come to work. Should we pay him extra to for his time to get to work? So again, certainly can agree to disagree, Sam, and
Yep.
open to the board if the board is willing to, explore this further. Obviously, the goal is to get it right,
Yep.
as close to right as we can. I'm not saying what's in front of you is 100% right, Sam.
Yep.
I don't know. That's up. That's why there's 5 of us to make the decision.
And again, I won't be offended if people don't want to talk about it anymore. So I have no ego in this, but I would view a different structure as being more equitable, but I realize people can disagree about that. So.
Absolutely. Andrew, we'll go around. Do you want to take a look at?
I appreciate Sam's, thinking outside the box here, but I just think this is this kind of falls under the category. I think this is the 3rd meeting we've discussed this at. And so I'm comfortable where I thought we had landed last time. I've just had a little nitpicky proposed edit on the pay rate. I think it should say $50 per meeting hour rather than per hour. And then we clarify that.
Yeah.
That's the, and Sam, just the $25,000 figure you're referencing, in considering the whole discussion we had before, I just think it's kind of a high number. So that's why I feel like I'm, again, sympathetic to the people on, I've been fortunate to be on all the boards that I've had paid minute takers. So I'm definitely sympathetic to volunteers that have to take minutes. And I'm conscious of what Mr. Goodney said earlier. But I just think that the cost is significant. So, and we've already talked about this a lot.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Healy.
Same.
Ms. Malinowski?
Same.
Okay, sorry, Sam.
No problem.
So we'll, again, I just, Andrew, I think that's a good edit to incorporate. And I was just going to take out some minor edits. We can do this and send it around again. Basically, I can just tell the board what I was looking to do. We can add the per meeting hour in there. I was just going to take out where it says the recording secretary will be paid this rate consistently. I was going to take out regardless of the length of the meeting. That caused some confusion. The whole moving forward sentence. So it would just read the recording secretary will be paid this rate consistently. Meetings that do not last 1 full hour will be paid in 30-minute increments. So that's my suggestion. It's cut and dry. There just seemed to be some level of confusion. Happy to send that around to the board. If everyone thinks that makes sense, we can send it around. We can do a general approval on it tonight.
Why not vote?
Or, I'm sorry, Sam?
Why not vote? Sounds like
Well, we can
folks-
certainly do it. So that, again, that was the change that I would suggest to the board.
With those proposed changes coming from both Andrew and Lisa, I move that we adopt, approve. What's the right word, Mark? What are we doing? Adopting it?
Adopting, approving, yeah, it's a
Thank you.
policy. So
Policy.
I'll say adopt it. The proposed recording clerk policy dated January 4, 2022 as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank
Second.
you. Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Nay.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
and Ms. Brascio, aye. Thank you. 4-1. Thank you very much. That brings us up to opportunities for state ARPA funding. Ms. Malinowski, I believe that you had asked for some information on this.
I did. So with Governor Baker passing the state ARPA bill, I was hoping that we could get some guidance in terms of what was available for Southborough to apply for. And, this, I think what we got from Jennifer from CSS was more general summation of the bill. So maybe it was premature for me to kind of ask for more specific details. And I think, as we go through these budget conversations and, other areas, ADA is one of them that we know we're going to need some funding for, infrastructure, that kind of thing. I just think we need to make sure that as we hear of things, we, check with the department that it would apply for or apply to. And also, hopefully keep in touch with the ARPA committee as they're kicking off tomorrow on opportunities that exist. So Mark, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
No, I think that makes sense. Again, it seems to be, ARPA seems to be a moving target. They just recently came out with some guidance that basically, opened up a little bit wider as to what you could spend, you could spend this on. So I agree it's something we need to keep our fingers on. And I think that, Jennifer can be instrumental in helping to guide us on some of those decisions.
Okay. Anybody want to add anything to that before we get to the, go ahead, Sam.
Lisa, just point to Mark's comment there. Mark, my understanding is what they did was to actually create a $10 million sort of safe harbor number there for general government expenditures. In other words, you don't have to do the lost revenue calculation now if you have less than $10 million allocated. So in fact, we're okay on the formula that they gave, but we're now even better off in terms of the $10 million freebie, if you will, in terms of the general government revenue or resources that we can spend for. So it just gives us, again, the flexibility that we thought we had even more certainly at this point. So I think, again, doesn't say what you have to do, but it certainly gives us a wider range of things that we can do without having to worry about justifying that they fit in one of the 4 buckets that they've defined. So I think that's good news.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Anyone else? Go ahead, Marty.
I think I might ask this question last time, or maybe just to myself, but has the ARPA committee met?
The meeting tomorrow.
They are, okay.
Tomorrow night for the first time. Yep.
Okay, all right. That answers my question. Thanks.
Okay, Andrew, did you have anything?
So can we make sure that this letter gets to their attention?
Absolutely. We'll make sure that they get it. And the second piece to this was items for consideration of funding. So I had put this on there, and as I reflect now, maybe it shouldn't have been on here. When I initially put it on here, I was thinking about how we move forward, and there are things that we as board members, I know, have thought about, might be some good uses of ARPA too. When I initially put this on here, I was thinking about retrofitting the public safety building with the SAM and Zoom technologies, so we could, continue down the process. And then Mr. Purple gave me an epiphany that it's probably premature in us actually giving items for the ARPA committee to consider, because it may get a little confusing as far as what they're bringing back to the board, and they may perceive those as priorities. So that was the reason this was on here. I rescind my reason for putting it on here. It does make sense to just let them do their job, and maybe Sam could approach them for that, or, we need to allow them to do what they were asked to do without any involvement, I guess, from us trying to guide their path. So that being said, I don't know if anyone has any comments on that, other than I'm happy to just take that second piece right off.
Yeah. And Lisa,
I don't think we need a motion to approve Lisa's decision.
Removing.
So.
But Lisa,
Yes,
I'm all set now that the golf course driveway is being paved. I'm out of ARPA ideas. So.
Sam, now that is on record, okay?
I'm gonna retire.
All right, so I guess that takes care of that item.
Lisa?
Yes, I'm sorry, Andrew.
Before we go off of it,
Sure.
I just want to comment that in Jennifer's discussion of the Massachusetts Homeowner Assistance Fund, the way it was described, it doesn't sound like it. Is this something that it would actually cost the town money, or is I think Jennifer saying that this is a program that's already out there. You just have to publicize it, include a link on your website to people, let them know that this is available. I thought it was actually very interesting how generous the eligibility requirements are. I don't know, there may be, just a handful of people that would be in need of this type of assistance, but I just found it interesting. If it's something that can help a couple people, to let them know about, if you fell behind on your mortgage payments because of the COVID pandemic and you meet these, I think, pretty generous eligibility requirements, you can maybe get some. I didn't think there was anything like that the town needed to buy into it or spend any money. I think she was just advocating that you can make this information available to residents. I don't know if anyone else read it the same way.
Yeah, I mean,
Go
I
ahead,
think
Chelsea.
they can apply for it through the state. So it doesn't necessarily have to go through the town. So that was probably a result of me asking how we could continue with the rent and mortgage program. And this one in particular, I've actually already talked to Youth and Family about. So and I can send this to them just to make sure that they have it. But that was almost in lieu of, well, we couldn't really continue the rent and mortgage anymore after CARES ended, but that is available. You can go on the state website and find it. So you would not have to go through the town.
Did we have
Chelsea?
excess demand for that rent and mortgage program that we couldn't satisfy? So there's a lot of more pent up demand out there for this. Do we know?
I've had a few inquiries, Sam, after the program ended. So you had to accrue for anything after October 31st, I think it was, even though it went through 12/31. But we had our program, we had already, before we knew about the 10/31 date, we had it ending on 12/1. So there was an inquiry after 12/1 that I directed them to this program prior to me getting this letter. I just got it online.
But we didn't have like 36 people that we had to turn down because we didn't have enough money. So, okay, good. But great to publicize it, certainly. Yeah, great opportunity to continue. That sounds good.
Chelsea, in looking at it, do you find that it was in line with what we were doing as far as qualifications? Okay.
Yes, it was pretty. I mean, I couldn't get through all the screens, Lisa, because you had to actually like go through, but it does, a lot of it was based on the same qualifications of our criteria. So I think in that sense, yes, I couldn't get through the screens to like get to the actual like numbers.
So potentially some that we may have helped through the rent program that we administered here through the CARES may, if they're still having some trouble, they may be able to continue to get some type of help through here.
So it may be worth contacting them specifically to say, are you aware that this is available?
You know what, I can certainly do that.
Yeah,
That's
I think that's great.
Okay.
Yeah, great idea, Sam.
Okay, I'll do that. Thanks, Sam.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Are you all
Or
set now?
Andrew.
Yes.
Thank you. Next up is town meeting date and survey results. So Mark, before I go to you with survey results, I just wanted the board to be aware as we consider potential dates that town council is not available, Mark, on the 14th of May, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so council is not available, so that takes the 14th out. So as we ponder our considerations, and then Mr. Purple, do you want to update the board on the survey?
Sure. This is just another piece to try to give you some more information to work with as we try to galvanize around a decision on a new date for town meeting that gives us the ability to hold it outside, which seemed to be the consensus that everybody was moving toward at the last discussion that we had. So I had asked Tim Davis in Recreation to do a Survey Monkey of the three sports groups, that are kicking off in the spring: baseball, lacrosse, and soccer. That's a total of about 600, roughly maybe 600 participants, understanding that there's some cross-pollination from the same family for a bunch of different for one or more of the sports. It's a significant number of people. You will notice we only got about 61 responses, so I think it's a little bit light, but just to get a sense of with this population, are the sports events and everything in that getting in the way of people attending town meeting, or A, were people not coming anyway, or B, are there certain things that people do care about, if they happen to be on the warrant and things like that. So I had sent this out to you earlier. Tim just sent this to me today, just to give a little bit of an update. Again, I think it's a little bit light. We did, after the initial slow response from the sports teams, we did put it out widely out on social media to try to get a public input. We didn't do a whole lot better, So I think that, by pushing this additionally to try to get some more information, just to try and help the board, again, galvanize around a new date. So that was the intention. I think good intention and not great response to this date at this point.
Muted, sorry. So there's really no action tonight. I just wanted the board to keep in mind that the 14th is unavailable, as we move forward in potential dates. And again, a lot of things can change in the next month. I mean, the knock on wood, the COVID numbers could go down and, we could see a substantial change. So this was just more put on the agenda for just information to share the survey, some of the general results. We'll come back, we'll put this on the next agenda as well. And if everybody could just think about, again, some dates we've thrown out, April 30th, May 7th, May 21st, but yeah, it gets a little harder as you get a little further down the road. So just some things for the board to consider. That's all. It was just an update. So no action required. Any comments, thoughts from the board before we move on from this item? Seeing none. All right, that takes us to our last public comment. I see we still have some wonderful people that have hung around, much appreciated. If any of the four of you would like to comment, please raise your hand. We'd be more than happy to hear what you have to say. All right, well, I will thank you for all for hanging around at the very least. And at this point, the board will be entering into executive session for MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21, and not returning to open session to discuss contract negotiations for the fire chief, Exemption 2, to discuss contract negotiations for the superintendent of public works, Exemption 2, and to review and approve executive session minutes from the January 4th, 2020 meeting, Exemption 7, as the chair has determined that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the town's position. Do we have a motion to enter into executive session?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call. Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Ms. Melanowski,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
and Ms. Braccio, aye.